Okay, so second shiur of Tanya. I would just point out, okay, I'm actually going to be gone for the next 4 Wednesdays, by the way.
Ah, you are? Okay.
So what we're going to do today is one more little intro shiur, and we'll dive into the beginning a little bit, Bez Hashem. When the Alter Rebbe wrote, again, by the way, the cycle of Tanya, there's a yearly cycle that Lubavitchers mainly, but many people do, as part of the Rebbe's institution of Chitas, of Chumash Tanya and Tehillim every day. It starts Yutes Kislev, which is Shabbos. So anybody who's interested in really picking up a daily dose of Tanya, a good time is Shabbos if you have a...
This Shabbat is stuff?
This Shabbos.
So,
Each book.
What's the cycle? How long it takes?
1 year for all 5 books.
Wow.
And it's delineated in almost every version of Tanya, probably every version, what day you're on. So this one actually doesn't. But so the Alter Rebbe, when he printed Tanya originally, so he sent out a letter, Igeres HaShlucha. He sent out a letter that was an introduction to why he printed it, what he's trying to accomplish. Eventually became Hakdamas HaMalakit. It became the preface to the book. So in the cycle, actually, it's learned as well. So we're going to go over a few points in the Hakdamas HaMalakit, the preface of the Alter Rebbe, the author of the book. First of all, he calls himself HaMalakit. A Malakit is not an author. A Malakit is a compiler. So it's the preface of the compiler. Earlier, which I did not mention last week, but in the Shar Blat, that first page that I showed you, he mentions it's Lukut. The name of the book is Lukutei Amarim, a collection of sayings. Okay, that's the name of the book. Hamalukat mipi Sfarim mipi Seifrim. It's a collection of sayings from books and from sages. He repeats that in the introductory letter, and he calls himself again the compiler. It's a compilation. In his humility, didn't seemingly give himself a lot of credit for whatever innovation that he introduced to Chassidus, to the book Tanya. So what does Mipi Sfarim and Mipi Seifrim? From books, it's a collection of sayings from books. What are the books? The Alter Rebbe, before he came to the Baal Shem Tov, he came to the Magid, the Chassidus of the Baal Shem Tov, he was a student of the Shloh. So some say Sfarim is the Shloh HaKodesh, who's pretty much our neighbor, right? He's in Tveria by the Rambam. He called himself a Shloh Dekayid. He davened to the kavandas of the Shloh, Kabbalah, and so on. And it's based on the Maharal of Prague, who is a predecessor to the thoughts the way they're written in Chassidus, a few generations before Chassidus. In fact, it says the Alter Rebbe, I believe, was 10th generation, doesn't make sense, but a number of generations, maybe it was 10, from the Maharal, direct lineage from the Maharal. So Mipi Sfarim is the Shloh and the Maharal, and others say Arizal, and you can actually see the Alter Rebbe quotes Arizal plenty in the 5 books. And Mipi Seifrim, the sages, are his Rebbe, which is a Magid, and the Baal Shem Tov as well, and some say also the Haradakar, but that he had learned by the Haradakar a little bit. Some of the sayings and teaching got from the Haradakar, the Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk. Okay, so that's the name of the book. In the preface, so the Alter Rebbe lays out why he's writing a book, why he wrote the book. There are a couple of traditions of how the book became compiled. One of them is that it was compiled based on 30 years of work, where everything painstakingly, every letter was worked on. There's actually a story of where the Alter Rebbe's brother came in while he was working on whether he should add a vav. We know where the vav is. I don't know exactly where it is. Vav means and, obviously, right? So whether this vav should be there or not be there. The brother came in 3 weeks later. He was still working on that vav. Couldn't decide whether it should be there or not be there. Everything is nuanced and exact and worked on with tremendous accuracy and attention to detail. So I forget why I mentioned that. That the work that the Alter Rebbe did in exacting paying exact attention to detail. He worked on it. The traditions of how the Tanya was written. So he worked on it for many, many years. Where did he get the ideas? From the people who came to him aside from being his teachers in the books, as we mentioned, people came to him for private audience. Yechidus came by the Alter Rebbe. So he compiled, based on all the answers that he was giving them, hadracha, guidance for life and guidance to connect to Hashem. So in the preface, the reason why he sent out this letter was he knew people would complain. So he quoted a Maimer Chazal, statement of the sages, a little bit backwards, right? It says, Eina ria doime l'shmiya. Eina shmiya doime l'riya. Hearing is not the same as seeing. When you hear something, you can't rely on it as much as if you saw it yourself. So the Alter Rebbe kind of made a twist on that in this preface, and he said, Eina shmiya doime l'riya b'sfarim. Eina, meaning when you hear something face to face, it's not as it's much more valuable than seeing it written in books. Okay, the original Maimer Chazal is seeing is not the same, hearing is not the same as seeing. This case is hearing is not the same as seeing in books. Better to hear face to face. And he was overwhelmed with the amount of people that would come to ask for guidance, and therefore he said, "I'm writing a book. I'm getting rid of the private audience, but don't worry, you'll have all the answers you need in the book." So this is the gist of that letter. He says, "I know you're going to complain. The books are not the same." In 3 different points, the Alter Rebbe makes why books do not satisfy the same as private audience. And then the Alter Rebbe wants to explain why his book is different. One of them is if a person is feeling in the dark in terms of his ability to connect to godliness, how do you expect him to see the light, the good light that's hidden in the book? He's too confused to be able to make sense of it. He can't relate to it. Easier if somebody sees him face to face and explains. Another one is even if he's not in the dark, not every book speaks to every person. And the third one is even if that book is al pi Torah, meaning Torah, every Jew has a piece of Torah. Every Jew should be able to find his neshama in Torah. And nonetheless, not everybody relates to every single part and merits to actually sense the good godliness that's in every single book. Why is my book different, says the Alter Rebbe? He says, "B'yoidai u'makirai ka'amina." I am coming and speaking to the people that I know them personally. I know their issues, and I have personal, intimate relationships with them. And they've come and they've told me their questions over all of these years. And I want you to know, says the Alter Rebbe, that all the answers, it's an amazing opening statement. All the answers to all of the questions in Avodas Hashem are in this book. It sounds like the Alter Rebbe is saying, anybody who I've seen face to face and you've come and met, I have answers for you. Yet we see over time that the Tanya has been printed over 5,000 times in different places. By the way, they just printed one in Gaza a couple weeks ago, right? If anybody saw I think we mentioned that last week maybe. So there is actually a campaign that the Rebbe had to print it, a spiritual campaign, to have it printed physically in all these different places. During the first Lebanese War in 1982, there's a whole story of Chabad emissaries from here in Tsfat who went there. And how they spoke to the generals and they were being pushed off and one day they let them in and they printed the Tanya in the middle of Beirut and they left. Right, and the Rebbe wanted that was actually under the instruction of the Rebbe. And one of the shluchim, his name was Aaron Lazer Tzeitlin Olav Shalom. So he actually was the one day he was a bacher, he was young, or he was very young. And he said, that's it, I can't, the Rebbe says, we got to do it. And he went and he got himself into a general, I don't remember exactly the story, it's on a video somewhere. And he had it printed. But aside from that, it's printed in all these places. Chabad houses all over the world are teaching Tanya. They're teaching Tanya to everybody, every walk of life. And there have been thousands, and probably tens of thousands of Jews who have been inspired to get more in touch with their Yiddishkeit, more in touch with their neshama through this book over the last 200 years. It was printed first in 1799, so that's 224 years ago. This year, Chof Kislev, 225 years. And it obviously was not intended just for the people that he had met personally. So there's a tradition amongst Chassidim that it's a spiritual tradition, that anybody who reads the book, so the Alter Rebbe put himself so much in the book, he knows you. That's like a mystical thing. It says, Tzfat Hashem, Ana ksavis, Ana nafshi ksavis yahavis, Anechi. I wrote myself into the Torah. Chassidim, tzaddikim rather, write themselves into their Torah. If you learn something from the Torah, he's connecting to you. I want to suggest something a little more down to earth, not just a spiritual thing. If you read the book, and there are ideas in the book that relate to you, you could be sure that the Alter Rebbe had your issues in mind. All the questions, all the answers to all the questions that you have in your Avodas Hashem, what stops you, why do you get hung up on certain things, are found in this book. So let's just go now to the first word. The book starts with the word Tanya. Tanya means, we learned in a Braisa, or was taught in a Braisa. If you look in the Gemara, from our Gemaras, it says Tanya b'seif perek gimel denida. Was taught in a Braisa on the end of the 3rd chapter of Maseches Nida. If you look in the book, the Maseches Nida, at the end of the 3rd chapter, you will see it says Darash Rabbi Simlai. Okay, the extant version of Gemara says it was a Memra, not a Braisa. It was a statement of an Amira, a generation after the Tanoim, that made the statement which the book starts with. And there is a version that says it's a Braisa, Tanya, but it's less extant. You can find it. You can write, and today in HebrewBooks.org you have all these old versions of Gemaras. You can find hundreds of years old. But in those days, if you ever, Rashi also, who lived several hundred years before that, Rashi has a lot of commentaries on the Gemara where he says Garsinan. The correct version is this one. In other words, everybody had a few copies of Gemara, and they had to compare them to each other to try and understand which is the legitimate one according to their understanding of the Gemara, explain why maybe a word was changed here and left out there. Because don't forget, this was handwritten for centuries upon centuries. And sometimes things are illegible, and sometimes you think maybe a copying error, and the person who's copying himself would change it because it didn't make sense to him. So you have all these different, that was the great Vilna Shas, it put everything... It printed a standard version of the Gemara. So you see by Rashi, he tells you this is the authentic one, according to my opinion. So the authentic one would be, if there's so many one way and very few another way, the inclination would be that the majority one is the authentic. Right. Yet the Alter Rebbe chose the non-extant version, the much less extant version of the Braisa. So there has to be an explanation for why he did that. Okay, the Alter Rebbe was an unbelievable Talmid Chacham who knew the whole Torah, Kol Torah Kula, and clear from his writings in Halacha, his writings in Kabbalah and Chassidus and so on. Why did he choose that one? Because the word Tanya is unique. Okay, in the writings of the Arizal, you find the word Tanya as a name of a klippa. Okay, a klippa is a negative energy. The name of that klippa, says the Arizal, Tanya, actually is a negative force that stands in the way of Talmidei Chachamim learning Pnimiyus HaTorah. It stands in the way of sages from learning the secrets and the depths of the wisdom of Kabbalah and Chassidus. So the Alter Rebbe wanted to break that klippa. So he starts and says, this book is called Tanya. Okay, we're going to start the book Tanya. By the way, actually, the Alter Rebbe in the beginning didn't call it Tanya. As we said, he called it Likutei Amarim, a collection of sayings. In some of his later works, he refers to the book as Tanya, and Chassidim have always called it Tanya, because that's the first word. But it takes on that meaning of breaking the klipa, and another meaning, which is brought by the Tzemach Tzedek, that Tanya is the same letters as Eisan, Eitan. Eisan means, it has two meanings. It means hard, like it's not an oak, but like super hard, or ancient. So the study of Tanya is meant to do is to open up the ancient of days within you, the essence of the soul, which is connected to the essence of Hashem, which is unbreakable, no matter what a soul has traveled through in the journey of his life, and whatever travails and traumas he's endured, he has a part of himself that's unbreakable. It's from the beginning of his existence connected to the beginning of all primordial existence of Hashem. It stands super strong, and can never be broken, and the book is meant to bring that out. Now, there's also a tradition that it does that whether you understand what you're reading or not. There were campaigns also by the Rebbe of people to say Tanya by heart. The Rebbe actually wanted people to learn the first 12 chapters by heart. Like people say Mishnayos by heart. Mishnah is the same letters as Neshama, so I think over there, Tehillim obviously, and the campaign also of Tanya. Okay? But obviously, if we're going to learn Tanya inside, we're going to get to the strength of the Neshama the way that the Alter Rebbe wanted to, Chabad, through our minds, to our hearts, and so on. So let's actually just begin the book. Okay? The Brisa that's brought in the beginning, or the Memra, depending on which version you have.
Some light.
But yeah, it's or Rabbi Simlai or Brisa. Okay? So we're going to just learn the Brisa, and I'm going to comment on what's going to happen for the next several chapters. There are questions that are going to be asked right away, and they get answered slowly throughout the book. Like the first one is answered in chapter 13. There's other ones that are answered in chapter 14, chapter 27. Okay, so Tanya, Sefer Gimel Nida. So we learned in a Brisa in the end of the chapter 3 of Nida, Maseches Nida, Mashbi Meisei. They make him take an oath. Who is him? The soul before it comes down into a body. Every soul before it comes into a body is made to take an oath. Tihi tzadik v'ati rasha. Be a tzadik and don't be a rasha. V'afilu kol ha'elam kulei eimin milcha. And even if the whole world tells you, tzadik ata, you're a tzadik, haya beinecha karasha. Be in your own estimation as a rasha. Okay? So what does it say? You take an oath, be a tzaddik, don't be a rasha, and even if the whole world tells you that you're a tzaddik, be in your own estimation as a rasha. That's the opening line. We're going to ask a couple questions here. First question that I will ask is not asked by the Alter Rebbe, but it's implied by him later, is why would the whole world tell you you're a tzaddik? And even if the whole world's telling me a tzaddik, that I'm a tzaddik, why would I have to feel like maybe I'm not? Everyone says that I am. Okay? What kind of person are we talking about? The whole world looks at him and says, man, you are a tzaddik. Right? This guy, and everybody talks about him tzaddik. The whole world, kol ha'ilam, the whole world. And still, he has to believe in his own mind that he is like a rasha. Okay? We'll get back to that. Maybe we'll deal with that one today. V'tzarich lahavin, we need to understand, says the Alter Rebbe. The hatnan, we learn it in a Mishnah, Avis Perek Beis. V'atihi rasha b'fnei atzmacha. The Mishnah says, don't be a rasha in your own eyes, in your own estimation. So now we have this brisa, seemingly, that says, let's just say it this way, one place in Shas, one place in the Talmud that says, even if the whole world tells you you're a tzaddik, be in your own eyes like a rasha. And another place in Shas it says, don't be in your own eyes a rasha. Question number 1 of the Alter Rebbe. V'gam, imi yeh be'einav karasha, and also further, if he'll be in his own eyes like a rasha, yeira levavi. He's going to be downtrodden in his heart. He's going to get depressed. V'yatziv, v'liyuchal aved Hashem b'simchu b'tuv levav. And he will not be able to serve Hashem with true joy. And there's a principle in Torah, and particularly in Chassidus, it's a pasuk by David HaMelech, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. So if all my avodas Hashem has to be b'simcha, how can you tell me to walk around feeling all the time that I'm a rasha? Why would be yeira levavai? Why will I be depressed? Because I try, no matter how hard I try. And not only that, I've done such a good job. The whole world is saying kol hakavod, and I have to feel inside like a rasha feel. I have to feel like I'm a rasha. I'm like Esav. How can you ever get up out of bed in the morning if that's how you feel about yourself? Mm-hmm. Further than that, says the Alter Rebbe, and if you don't become downtrodden from this, depressed from this, you can come to, what would be the word? Not frivolity, but frivolousness, carelessness. If there's 2 options if I feel like I'm never going to succeed. Either you give up, either you're depressed because you really want to succeed, right? You're a musician or an artist of some form, and you try to get accepted by people to buy your work or to give a gig somewhere, and nobody ever takes you. You play for them, and nobody's signing you, nobody's giving you a chance, and so on. That has one of 2 possibilities that's going to happen. One is you become depressed, or you give up. So if that's happening in my connection to my soul, if that's happening in my neshama, my avodas Hashem, so that's disastrous. I can't serve Hashem with joy because I'm always in a state of, I'm a loser. I'm never getting a gig with my avodas Hashem. I'll never succeed. Or I give up. And who knows what that's going to look like. The Alter Rebbe says, here's the answer. When I say that, the first line leads to what will take 13 chapters to flesh out. Ha'inyan. But here's the matter, here's the answer. We find in the Gemara 5 categories. Tzadik v'toivlei, tzadik v'ralei, rasha v'toivlei, rasha v'ralei, v'beinoni. There's the tzaddik who it's good for him, and that in the simple pshat means life is going well. Tzadik v'ralei, tzadik and it's not going so well for him. And then the rasha v'toivlei, rasha who's having a good time in this world, he's healthy and so on. And rasha v'ralei, and a beinoni, and the intermediate man. Okay, the book obviously we said the first book is called Sefer Shel Beinonim, the book of the intermediate man. This intermediate man is not just, he's extraordinary, he sounds ordinary, but he's actually extraordinary. And he is the answer to all the questions that we've asked. Okay? What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give you some of the answers. And then when I come back after this little break, we'll learn from here inside Allah Seder. The first insight is the way that I translated you the statement of Rabbi Simlai or the Braisa, the way that it would normally be translated. The Alter Rebbe in chapter 13 has a very unique translation. How are we doing on time here?
10 minutes.
The way I translated it, and the way it's translated if you look at it anywhere in English translation, this is how it will be translated, is you take an oath, be a tzaddik and don't be a rasha. And even if the whole world tells you in your own eyes you're a tzaddik, be in your own eyes like a rasha. Be in your own eyes like a rasha. And the other, the Mishnah says, don't be in your own eyes a rasha. What's the distinction? There's one letter distinction. Like. So if we would say it differently, the way the author was going to read it is, you're not supposed to be in your own eyes a rasha. Let's say it in English. You're not supposed to be a rasha in your own eyes. You're supposed to be like a rasha in your own eyes.
What's the difference?
So there's a rasha and there's a like a rasha. What's the difference? Right, in other words, his title would be like a rasha. So don't be like a rasha in your own eyes. Be like a rasha in your own eyes. What's the difference? Tzaddik. A tzaddik is somebody, according to Tanya, who according to Torah Parasha, he's going to flesh that out in chapter 1, is somebody who has no Yetzer Hara. He has no inclination inside of himself other than that wondrous godly identity that we all share, but he has no other identity.
Adam before the sin.
Like Adam before the sin, very similar. You give Kap of Shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. Or we'll have to get into it inside the Tanya itself. Moshe Rabbeinu, David HaMelech is going to be brought. We're going to have some pushback on it, because the author is going to say a tzaddik cannot sin. So we'll have to discuss that when it comes up. But in the beginning, in the middle of chapter 1, the author ever says, the true level of a tzaddik is like David HaMelech, who said, Libi chalal bekirbi. What does the Gemara say on Libi chalal bekirbi? My heart is a void within me. He says, because he didn't have a Yetzer Hara, he harged every times. He killed it. He didn't have his left side of his heart, which is filled with his animalistic energy, he destroyed. Through tshuva, through whatever, if it is shaykh tshuva, David HaMelech is a harder character to discuss, which we will, But the idea of a tzaddik, again, is he doesn't have this inner pull. There's no battle with a left side. There's no battle with an animalistic side. My animal has all sorts of desires in the world that I have to either subdue or transform into some sort of connection to make them connect to Hashem. A rectified person, a whole person, and a holy person is somebody whose whole identity and everything he desires is connected to the deepest desire to be in a bond with the infinite. Not in a bond with a piece of pizza, not in a bond with whatever it might be. But the expression of his pizza, the expression of his relationships is all an expression of the bond with the infinite. That's why, so who's this Beinoni? A rasha, by the way, according to Tanya, is somebody who even once in a blue moon transgresses, whether it be in thought, speech, or action. Okay, we'll get again into those details. Why is it called a rasha? Just the potential even, and especially if it comes out, even once in a blue moon. And there are categories. This is an amazing person, by the way. Somebody who only trips up once every 6 months, let's say. He has gives into some sort of negative energy once every 6 months. Entertains a negative thought about another Jew. which is prohibited to do that, right? Speaks Lashon Hara. Once every 6 months he does that, we give him the category of Rasha. Even though he gets up early in the morning and he davens for hours and he learns for hours and he does chesed and he's giving tzedakah and he's the nicest person and kol ha'olam kulei and the whole world says to him, tzaddik ata ira tzaddik. Who is this person? On the outside, he's exactly like a tzaddik. That's why kol ha'olam, the whole world looks at him and says, tzaddik ata. Because you look at this person, you see the way he spends his time, you see his beautiful character, his refined character traits, and you think he must be a shining tzaddik. And what's possible? What's the sages telling him? Be like a Rasha in your own estimation. Realize you know what's going on inside. If you ever have some sort of inclination towards negativity, you should know you're not a tzaddik. And what the Gemara is telling him is beware. You don't want to fall below. If you don't do your work and take care of your inner world, if you relax for a minute and you're not a tzaddik, you'll fall. The evil will ebb up inside of you, could potentially ebb up inside of you, and trip you up. So who is this distinction between be like a Rasha? That's a Beinoni. Why is a Beinoni, the intermediate man, called like a Rasha? On the outside, he's perfect, thought, speech, and action, 24/7. Even thought, we'll get into that. 24/7. Superman. But he has a Yetzer Hara. His Yetzer Hara can actually even speak to him. It can tell him, it can incline him towards negativity, even towards the most terrible lusts and desires inside of his mind. Those thoughts can occur to a Beinoni. So he knows on the outside, everyone, the whole world says tzaddik ata, and he has to realize he's not a Rasha, he's a like a Rasha. Why is he only like a Rasha? Because like a Rasha, he has a Yetzer Hara. He has an animal soul that's attracted towards things that are the antithesis, perhaps, or at least not in consonance with his relationship with his infinite neshama. This is the premise of the book. The book is here to especially the first 8 chapters, lay out the dynamic of your godly self and your godly identity, the part of yourself that's exactly like a tzaddik. And they lay out your animalistic part of yourself, which is at least similar to, it's like a Rasha, that part of yourself. And chapter 9 starts the battle between these two identities. Just like a person who has to deal with any kind of issue and challenge that he might have in his life. A person who has challenges with alcohol has to deal with himself. A person who has challenges with relationships, even if he's a fine person, but he can't make a relationship work, he has to deal with himself. He has to struggle in some sort of way. The description of that struggle between the holy, pure side of yourself and the less than holy side of yourself is described in chapter 9. 10, 11, and 12, the Alter Rebbe talks about to what degree have you won this battle? And that's a tzaddik, Beinoni, and Rasha. And Be'ez Hashem, looking forward to actually delving inside.
Could we just to clarify, you're saying that every human who has the Yetzer Hara is defined as like a Rasha, because
minimum. Any human who has inclinations towards things that will disconnect him from the infinite is automatically not a tzaddik.
I understand that, but why does it automatically put him into like a Rasha? Why isn't there an in-between part that's neither a tzaddik or a Rasha that's not defined as a Rasha?
There are 2 levels of Rasha, right? There's a Rasha of a Rale and a Rasha of a Tevle. So what the description is, it's a spiritual state. It's not a judgment call on a person. We're used to Rasha being like, oh, he's a Rasha. Right. What the Alter Rebbe is describing is the state of the person's inner world. The inner world of the tzaddik is all godliness. The inner world of the Beinoni is all about the battle to be all about godliness. And there's no other identity to him other than wanting to be and actively being about godliness, even though there's a voice inside of him, or could be a voice inside of him, that tries to pull him the other way. A Rasha is someone who's susceptible to falling. The Beinoni is in a spiritual super state as well. In other words, we're all, in this construct, we probably all find ourselves in the level of the Rasha that it's good for him, meaning the good is what's more prevalent by him. But he's in a state of he can go against Hashem, even for a split second. So he's in a state where he's not that's the spiritual state. We'll flesh it out.
I just want to say that, it seems to me that those definitions, the 5 definitions that you mentioned, are putting the bar so high that it becomes, like if we're all Russia's, that's Tovlo, what chance do we have? If it's like, it's a very condescending... That's
going to be a question on the first page. They're going to say, what chance do we have? And then again in chapter 28. But know this, in fact, so in chapter 28 and 29, the Alter Rebbe says, really, you have to understand, like we said before, it's not a judgment. It's not like you're used to hearing the word Russia. I say, he's a Russia. In order to learn this, we have to wipe that away from us. What it's saying is there's a certain, know yourself. Know your inner world. And I know, and ostensibly you know, and the more a person gets to know his inner world, know your inner world and know where your failings and trippings up are. Know what state you are in, know what state you're capable of achieving. And if you don't realize and know those states, you can never actually go up the ladder of your Avodas Hashem. You have to realize, it's not again a judgment, but the categorization is important to realize where I am, what I have to work on. There's no self-delusion over here. And then the Alter Rebbe says, every small step that you make, you actually connect with infinity. It's not to say, oh, he's a Rasha. A Rasha who pushes away Lashon Hara even one time, he's diving into the infinite in a very unique and powerful way.
So just one last question.
Yeah.
What category do you think the people, the Jews that were in Mount Sinai, who achieved that elevation of the view of Mount Sinai, and hear the first 2 commandments before they sin, what category would you put those in out of your 5?
It says that our Sinai it was a nation of tzaddikim.
They were tzaddikim.
Yeah.
So they reached
at least for those 10 minutes.
For those 10 minutes, they
sure.
reached tzaddikim.
For sure.
Okay.
By the way, if we heard God speaking to us, we'd either be crazy or tzaddikim.
Right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Go ahead. One more question.
What's the difference between Benoni and like a Russia?
Nothing. The like a Russia that it's talking about is a Beinoni. If you're on the Pneumius, on the inner aspect of the reading, in other words, what the sages are instructing you is to be, in your own estimation, a like a Russia. Meaning to realize that even though you're rectified, thought, speech, and action, you are the man. You are the greatest man I've ever met, personally. Right? Nonetheless, realize that it's possible at least, and maybe you're even aware of some of your inner workings. Don't just relax and be like, oh, I'm a tzaddik, because you could fall. So you have to realize you're a like a Rasha. What's a like a Rasha? Not a Rasha. Not a Rasha at all. He's a Beinoni. He's amazing. But he's got the inner inclinations like a Rasha, and that keeps him safe, that knowledge.
Shkoyach. Excellent.
Thank you.